Well, hello everybody out there. Welcome to another episode of the 11 Bang Bang channel. Today we are going to be doing something that people keep asking us about. And no, I'm not dressed like I'm in the 18th century because we're messing with chemicals and power tools and stuff like that. Things that can really mess up your 18th century getup real quick. But we are redoing a military heritage gun and getting it in good working order. And this episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. And they are as follows. By Land and Sea. Ian Harris, John Jackson, Brian Proxmire, Diane Houston, and here we go, I'm going to attempt it. Jacob, Elbick, Edgegard, Pedersen. I think I got closer that time. Anyhow, thank you guys. We really appreciate what you're doing to help us here. So, on with the show. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the 11 Bang Bang channel. I'm your host, Ethan Woods. And I get this looks a little odd considering I'm not dressed how I usually am. And also, no, my hand is not bleeding. That is a experiment I was trying out. But this is a little bit different than what we usually do. We have gotten so many requests on what we do with these Indian-made muskets, what the whole process is with them. And so I thought we'd go ahead and take you for the ride on this one with the little Paget Carbine. This one I've got big plans for, and I'm going to go ahead in this video and tell you what some of those plans are. But yes, as you can notice, we've already got some of the finish kind of chipped off there. Again, same experiment. But let me tell you about what we are going to be doing here with this gun. So first of all, we're going to go and put the gun through the ringer as far as getting it ready to shoot well, and defarbing the gun. What do I mean by defarbing? Well, there's this thing in the kind of living history world called farb, where it is where you get something really close to being right, but then there's something that's just blatantly not right about it. And that is basically what this little gun is here. It is kind of close to a real Paget carbine, but there's a lot of differences between it and the real thing. Luckily, though, most of those differences have to do with removing material instead of adding to it. Some of them you got to add a little bit to it. But let's go ahead and let's talk about what we've got to do with this gun to get it shooting. And that is we've got to drill the touch hole and we've got to proof test it. Now, whenever we drill the touch hole, I'll go ahead and I will document it for you. And when we proof test it, I will also be showing that to you. But first of all, let's talk about what you do when you first get one of these military heritage or Indian-made guns. And that is we're going to do an inspection. And basically what this is the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look for soft spots in the wood. And basically the way you do that is you can take your fingernail and you can go along it and you can poke at it and see if you find a spot where your fingernail sinks in a little easier than it should. This gun, the stock on this gun is actually very solid, so I'm not too concerned about that. The next thing you're going to want to look for is major defects like crooked bayonet lugs, like, you know, that are cannon. Just big things that glare out at you. And the reason why we're looking for these right now before we drill the touch hole is because if you see something that you really don't like that you just can't live with, go ahead and probably contact Military Heritage and let them know you're sending it back, but don't alter it at all before you send it back to them. On this gun, we've got actually several very big things that are problems. Namely, I don't know how well the camera will pick it up. I'll put it on my shoulder here. This lug for the bridle, for the captive rammer, is canted off to the side. Also, the front sight is slightly canted. Now, normally, this would be where, if I was a beginner, I would probably be sending it back about this point. However, I've got a plan. See, my plan is I'm actually going to take this whole assembly off, and also I noticed the way this is set up that the bridle works itself loose after a while. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this screw out, which is not very tight at all. If you tighten it too tight, it won't work. There's our rammer. Let me get the rest of this apart, and I'll explain to you some of what I'm doing up here. So this is the rammer bridle. Get that off there. Right here. These pieces right here. There's going to be some work done to that. But let's look at this lug on the bottom of the barrel. Okay, now it should be a little more obvious just how off this is compared to this ramrod pipe. So where we are lucky at with this problem is the fact that the lug itself is already way too big. It's too wide, and it is too long. So what we're going to do is we're going to drive a rod in here. We're going to weld that rod in place, and then we are going to take and we're going to square this whole lug off till it's a lot smaller and where it is flush with our ramrod channel here. Then, once we get that done, like I stated, the front sight is also a little canted, but the good thing is this thing is so wide and the originals were so fine that we can literally file it down to the side that we want and we will have a perfectly centered front sight. So that's another thing we're going to have to do. But we can't do any of that until we drill the touch hole. And we're going to show you doing that tonight. That'll be in this first episode. But let's go ahead and let's talk about some other things we're going to do with it. Namely, those are the main problems I'm having with function. I was afraid I was going to have problems with function with this cock because it's a little bit, as you can see how far that is going back. And whenever I got it all the way down, which that is a pain when you got that safety, all the way down, it almost looks like it's straight up and down. But I found out if you put an oversized flint in the gun, it sparks really good. So I'm not too concerned about that right now. But once we got the main issues fixed about the functionality of the gun, oh, and that's another thing I need to fix, is this screw that holds the bridle on the front. It's threaded on the end and it's threaded into the one of these pieces. Yeah, it's threaded into the bridle itself. This is not how the originals would have been done, because after a while of running it back and forth, you actually unscrew it. So what I'm going to probably be doing is once I do some things with that bridle, which I'll get to in a second, I'm probably just going to take a pin and I'm going to basically mushroom the ends of it, and that's how the originals were anyways. You won't be able to get it back off, but that's how it's supposed to be, and it won't come off when you're trying to use it. So, without further ado, let's talk about the defarbing process. And I can tell you this, like I stated before, there's a lot of stuff on this gun that I've got to do to make it a little more historically accurate, because if you look at an original and you look at this gun, you do realize that while they have the kind of the same idea, this is a whole lot different from an original. So I'm going to start from the tip of the barrel here, and we'll work all the way down there to the butt plate, and we'll talk about what we're going to be doing to defarb. And one of the things is, like I stated, we're going to get that smaller, kind of narrowed down. And one of the things that I would like to mention is the fact that that is so wide, it's supposed to be the same diameter as that ball there, so that way these pins that stick out the side aren't coming loose. So we're going to be shrinking that down, as I stated before. Also, with this rammer, it's got this mushroom tip on the end. That is tearing up the ramrod channel. So what I'm going to end up doing is we're going to get rid of that, and we are going to weld a ball, basically. We're going to put a bead on the end of this that's shaped like a ball, and then we'll file it to a nice round ball shape. So that way, whenever you're putting it back in the rammer channel, you're not tearing up the wood. When you're pulling it out, you're not tearing up the wood. And yeah, I think it'll be a little smoother design. But I think that's about all I'm going to do to the rammer, because after that, the rammer's fairly decent. What isn't decent is the bridle. This is what I was talking about earlier whenever I was going to do some other things with the bridle. It's the right design, however, they are the wrong shape. What I need to do is I need to heat these up, and I need to bend them out till they're almost flat. The reason why is an original Paget, you can see here, whenever this sits in the gun, oops. When this sits in the gun, it sits like that. What it should be is it should be all the way back here, and it should actually be pushing the rammer slightly downward to help retain it in the gun. So we will also be doing that. Now, once we get that all done, we should be fairly good. Also, once we get the front sight kind of filed down to where we want it, we should be getting pretty good until we get back down here towards the trigger guard and the lock plate. And what needs to be done on the lock is a lot. So if we look at originals, what we need to do is, starting here at the front, I'm going to take, now there were some Paget carbines who had this feather spring design with this little point on the end. However, what I'm going to be doing is, if nothing else, I may polish that down to where it's a little more refined. If not, I may bob it down to a small circle and file it down to fit. Yeah, that's one thing I'm going to have to do. I contemplated getting another pan from the rifle shop for this gun, and I may do that yet. I haven't made up my mind. This pan is completely 100% wrong for a Paget carbine. It's too flat. It should be a lot more rounded up here in the nose, and instead of a piece coming out, swooping up, there should actually be a rounded nose up here and then a bit coming down to engage that feather spring. So there is that. Also, the pan on this gun, at first I was like, it's 100% wrong, and I still think it's fairly wrong, but after seeing some examples of very, very, very early Paget carbines, there are some that kind of look like this. I actually almost bought one time, an original. I'm still kind of kicking myself for it because I think it only went for $650. It was a Portuguese contract gun, and I did notice that it had a pan very similar to this one. Now, what am I saying about it being different from a regular Paget that you usually see? Well, the original Pagets actually had a water-resistant design on the pan. Basically, the pan was raised up above the rest of the pan where it held the powder, and there were little troughs that the water would, like I said, the top of the hammer here was rounded. So if you were getting rained on, the water was supposed to flow down kind of out those channels instead of seeping into your powder pan. Pretty cool design. But I don't think we're going to be able to do that with this gun. I would love to, but I just don't think it's going to happen. So we're going to do like an earlier design. Next, after that, what I want to do is we need to kind of trim this tail on the cock down a little bit. That's not correct. It's too tall. Also, this circle, it needs to be more oval. So I'm going to oval that out. And then we're going to get down here onto the lock plate. And there's a lot that's got to go on back here to make it even look right. So what we need to do here on the lock plate. Well, first of all, I need to take the safety off. We're going to take the lock plate, the whole lock assembly out and apart. And we're going to take this safety here. We're going to bob that little bit off the back here. That is not supposed to be there. Then I'm going to kind of round out the safety tab here toward the front, kind of egg-shaped. Then we're going to take a file to the lock plate itself, and we're going to, I don't know if you can see it here, which you probably can, too far away, but under that safety, the lock plate is already stepped. Now that step shouldn't just be where the safety is, it should be this whole back part of this lock plate, and it should be stamped tower back there, or knock. Actually, I'd like to get a knock marking so I can get this, make this kind of a knock built gun, or a clone of one. And yeah, that should be the lock. That should be good for that. Then what I'm going to end up doing is we're going to take this trigger guard. The trigger guard on this gun is not correct. Now here is, I said that most of this was removing material and not adding to. This is going to be one of the points where we may have to add to, and I'm going to have to figure out how. The original Paget would have a big old sloping, large, almost like a brick up here on front of the trigger guard at brass. This one doesn't. It comes straight up in and then out. Also, they got this design that's filed in here. That's not right. I'm probably just going to take a file and file this all flush right there. And then the big part is, now I'm kind of glad this is designed the way it is that this should be hollow right here, and you should just have a piece of brass coming back up into the gun right there. They've got that all as one solid piece. That's fine. I can take that off, get a file, get a little hacksaw, cut it out, file it out, and then polish it up, and we'll be good to go there. Then also we have the trigger. The trigger is not right in this gun. It is this big, arching, polished trigger on here. Super long. What it should be is a much shorter, reinforced in the back trigger that is almost straight. I haven't figured out what I want to do with that yet. I may just make a new trigger to make it a little more correct. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that going into the future. Okay, moving on, we're starting to move closer to the back now. Everything on this side of the gun, that is all correct. This two-ring saddle ring setup, that's fine. Oh, the rear sight. We will be taking the rear sight down, and luckily they made it really high and really huge, so we will have the option to take it down to sight the gun in. Then, this is another thing I've kind of contemplated, and I haven't made up my mind whether or not I want to do it or not, but this stock is too wide back here. You've heard me kind of talk about and laugh about people talking about these are fence posts. This one kind of is. This stock should drop the the comb should drop right about here, and it should line up evenly with the bottom of the lock plate. So about to right there. If I do that, what I'm going to have to end up doing is, once I get done doing that, is take the butt plate and then re-inlet it down here onto the bottom part of the stock, and then trim the butt plate to fit the gun. So, and with the screw holes already being drilled, I'm not quite sure I want to go that far into it. So once all that's done, obviously we're going to need to refinish the gun. I'll strip all this off and we'll try something different. But yeah, once all that is done, we will have a semi-correct Paget carbine. It still won't be 100% correct because we won't have the right pan and the right hammer unless I get another hammer from the rifle shop. And the good thing about those rifle shop hammers or Frisons or whatever you want to call them is you can make them fit. They come as a casting. So we might be working with that. Also, when we get this lock apart, all the internals are getting polished, especially right here. If we're going to use this Frison, right here where it meets the feather spring, we are going to polish the living daylights out of that. We're going to polish inside around the bridle and around the sear, on the springs. Everything in that thing is going to be polished nice and bright. Also, we will then deaden the steel. What do I mean by deadening the steel? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take a very fine sandpaper and we're going to run it up and down until the steel stops looking like the chrome on your 1955 Cadillac. Once again, let's go ahead and check this spark because this is really kind of neat. Alright, let's watch the spark. Not bad. Okay, but before we get too much into this, we're going to have to drill this touch hole. And let me show you how I do this. First of all, I go and I find the pan. I don't do like a lot of people do where they pull the breech plug and they do all that. Usually I measure. I've already measured this one and I've found that the breech comes right to about here. So I know that anywhere around here I'm going to be good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of the pan. And no, I do not have a center punch with me here. This is actually a needle file, a very cheap needle file. I've got a bunch of these. But it's hard enough we can use it as a punch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the middle of my pan here. Okay. Then I'm going to, as closely as I can, level it up with the top of the pan. And I know you probably can't see this. And then I'm going to punch it. Okay, so now, I don't know how well the camera will pick it up, but we've got a fairly good divot in there now. So, now that I've got that marked, we're going to close that up, make sure that we don't have a spot where, yeah, we're good. Make sure we're getting sealed up with the pan. And we're going to go ahead and take this thing, can't call it a you-know-what on YouTube anymore, they'll yell at us. We're going to drive out these barrel wedges. And they are stuck. Wowie. Okay, barrel wedges are out. They were a little bit of a pain, fairly sticky because, well, they were basically glued in there with all that paint or whatever they put on this. And some of you guys are noticing this. Yeah, we did scuff that up, and if you couldn't tell, I match it because we were trying out a dye, and yeah, I dyed my hand. Anyhow, let's go ahead and let's remove the breech nail here. Okay, breech nail is out. Now let's go ahead and remove the stock. There it is. It is out. Put that over there. And you can see how nasty this thing is. You can wipe it off. Still got some of that dye on there that I'd been playing around with. But there's your slots. Yeah, now, hopefully, I'll see if I can get this to focus here. Yeah, okay, so now, I'll see if you can see how off that lug is. It's not off by a whole lot, but it is off by enough that it's causing an issue. So we are going to have to resolve that. But, like I said, we might as well commit. You can see my mark right here. Let's see if I can get this to focus. Yeah, you can see my mark right there I made with the center punch. Let's go drill our touch hole. What do you say? Alright guys, we are all set up here to drill this touch hole. Now what I want to show you guys here is this really isn't rocket surgery, as some people have stated. I've just got a simple tradesman drill press here with a nothing too fancy drill bit in it. I mean, obviously it's a steel cutting bit, but it ain't too fancy, so let's go ahead and let's cut this. And I'm going to go ahead and start it without even any cutting oil and see what we got. Take our time though. That is the main thing. Take your time. Because, especially right here. Because man, if you try to rush this right here and you slide off that hole, like I just about did right there, you can really be in a world of hurt. Oh yeah, that steel is cutting real easy. I don't even know if I'll need any cutting oil for this as long as I keep going slow. Also, make sure you're going in straight. You don't want to drill a crooked hole. Take your time. If you need to, take a break. Yeah, we're cutting good. Make sure that everything is lining up as it should. Keep an eye on that straightness, because you can start to cant one of these if you ain't careful. I would strongly suggest that you go ahead and order a touch hole liner with it. That way, if you do mess up, like a lot of people do, I've done it myself, just go ahead and drop a touch hole liner in it. It'll make it a faster ignition anyways. There, we're still cutting. These breeches, by the way, are also very thick right at this point. So if you think you're cutting through the breech plug, you're probably not. You're probably just cutting through this really thick wall at the breech. Go ahead and take a break on that. And for anybody wondering, this is 1/16 of an inch hole. There we go, just broke through. Yep, see we're pulling up oil. Thought we broke through, we ain't yet. We're starting to cant a little bit. We're also about to run out of drill bit. There it is. All her out. Want to make sure that's good and clean. You don't want a lot of flashes in the pan. Alright, now let's test her out. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. We got ourselves a touch hole. Easy as that. So now what we need to do here is we need to drop a barrel back in and see how well that touch hole lines up. Let's go ahead and do that right quick. You're seated in there. There you go. Alright. Close the pan door. Now as you can see, whenever I close that hammer, we can no longer see the hole. And then there it is, right at the top. Like right at the top. So that's about perfect. Also perfectly centered. Some people might think that's a little bit big. I just have to remind you, this is a carbine. It's designed to be more reliable than accurate. Let's go ahead and move on to the next order of business. Let's take a look at the inside of this lock. To do this, we will have to remove the side nails here. And this is the first time these have been pulled off, so let's go ahead and do that. Get our handy dandy screwdriver. These shouldn't be too tight. If they're real tight, you may have a bit of an issue because, well, that's a generally good way to suck that lock right into that stock too far and break something. So yeah, they shouldn't be all that tight. Pull it out. Lock should slide right out. And there is our lock. Go ahead and, well, we're on safe. that safety can get in your way if you ain't careful. Okay, let's go ahead and pull her back to full cock here. There we go. And let's snap this lock. Not bad, really. Geometry's a little off. I can see where they've done some work right here. And I'm going to be doing some more work right there. You can see where they they had their geometry off, and so their order of business was to, or their idea was to take that step down on that lock, or the cock right there, which is not wrong. That's been done on a lot of originals. And if you couldn't tell, we've actually still got quite a bit of room down here on the sear. We've still got quite a bit of room down here to play with, so I'm probably going to go ahead and take that down even a little bit more, so that way the cock actually sits more at an angle instead of almost straight up and down. But really not bad. Not bad at all. We can make this work. Now here, if you can see, I'll put it on half cock, move that safety in. You can see that little step that safety rides in. We're going to remove this tail, like I showed. This is a little better view of it. Remove this tail off the safety, cut that off, round this off, and then we're going to bring the rest of this lock plate back from here, which is right where the tab is, back. We're going to bring that lock plate down to that level. I've gotten a hold of a guy on Facebook who makes stamps, and so we may be going ahead and putting a stamp on here that says tower or knock. Probably knock. Okay, that's the lock. That's another bit of work we're going to have to be doing. Let's go ahead and, there we go. There's the carbine ring. That thing's actually perfect. Yep, good. The trigger in this gun and the trigger guard, for some reason, are held in by flat-headed screws. Yeah, that's not right, I don't think. I don't know, I've never seen a picture of a Paget from the inside of the lock. But you can tell, yeah, there you go. That's what these usually look like. One guy said they looked like they'd been hawked out with a tomahawk. But you know what? That's not too far off from what I see on a lot of originals. And the reason why they're not as tight as what you see on some of modern day rifles is because this stock gets wet, it's going to tend to swell. And if you got a really tight fit in there and that wood starts to swell against different pieces, your gun may just go down. So this is actually more reliable. However, we may go ahead and polish this up a little bit so it doesn't look so rough in there. But let's go ahead and let's take the rest of these parts off. Take these two screws off back here. Now I want you to pay attention when we pull this trigger guard off, because you're going to notice a lot of this brown stuff back here. It looks like wood is going to come out. I can tell you right now it ain't wood, that's wood filler. Let's go ahead and pop this off. Oh, it's tight. It's like it's glued. We're going to be gentle because we really don't want to split the wood out too. It can be pretty thin there by the wrist. I don't even know why they wood glued that right there. That's actually a very good inletting job from what I'm seeing. Oh, it's tight though. Alrighty. There we go. There is our trigger guard in all its glory. Now, this is what I was pointing at earlier. You can see the very rough engraving there on the end. That is not historically accurate at all. There shouldn't be anything up there. We're going to take a file and we're going to flatten that all out with the wood. Let's see here. Get all that wood filler off there. Yeah, you can kind of see where it was a little bit of a rough fit there at the edge. Get all that wood filler out. Alright, here's our trigger. And as I stated before, that trigger is 100% wrong. Yeah, we're going to have to do something about that, I think. Interesting trigger design, though. You don't really see that generally on muskets. And I think that this may have something to do with why we have screws, because there's our trigger pin right there. I like that little design. That's pretty neat. That's actually a really good design. So let's go ahead and let's talk about what we're going to do with this trigger guard here. I'm going to take a hacksaw, and before I get too far into this, let me show you what's wrong with this. So you see how this is all right here. This is all one solid piece. That's not right. What we should have is this piece coming back here as it is, a V right here, and then we should have another piece coming out this way that is rounded at the end and doesn't even touch the gun. It's more of a decorative thing. So what we are going to do is we're going to take a hacksaw, and I'm probably going to start right about here. That looks about right. Can't mark worth nothing with this thing. And then we're going to cut a V, like such, from there to there, from there to there. And then we're going to take a file, or a series of files, and then round out this piece right here and make that a little more historically accurate. Let's go. Start here. Files and clean it all up the way we like. Alright, so the cock on this gun is actually, the geometry is off. And so the cock, whenever it is all the way down, it's actually almost standing straight up. So a lot of that I think is having to do with this step right here, which you can already tell that the guys who built this realized that they screwed up because they have already started filing down on it. Problem with this is if you file down too much, your mainspring will actually slide off of the fly. So we're going to very gently take this down a little bit at a time, and we'll put it back in the gun and we'll see how it works. Let's try that. Alright, so that is a lot of work we've got to do to this gun, and I'm running out of card space. Main priority before I run out of battery on the, or card space on this, is to get this sent with Caleb so we can get that plugged up, welded up, and then filed to the right dimensions and the right angle. So yeah, that's probably my #1 priority, because as it stands right now, if you keep using this thing, your rammer ends up falling off and stuff. And when we go to do that, we're also going to be taking this rammer in and basically welding a bead on the end of this and then filing it into a ball. So there is that. Those are my main priorities right now. So guys, as always, thank you for watching. Trust in God, keep your powder dry, and stay tuned for part 2. Bye.